Good evening, I'm Ian Hannamansing. Tonight, Russian troops advance in Ukraine and are met with fierce resistance. Where fighting has intensified and plans for talks between Ukrainian and Russian officials. A warning from Russia's president that has the world on edge.
We urge Russia to tone down its dangerous rhetoric regarding nuclear weapons.
Families are separated as refugees surge across the Polish border.
Your husband can't leave?
No, he has to fight against Russia and to stop them.
And fighting back in Ukraine.
You see groups of men, women putting up roadblocks, basically getting ready to meet the enemy.
Peter Zelmayev fled Kyiv with his family. Why he's gone back. This is The National. And this is Kyiv, more than 4 days since Russian forces entered Ukraine. But despite airstrikes and fighting in the streets, the city's defenses have so far held. Those swift gains some predicted for Russia haven't happened. The Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky have agreed to send delegations to talks, but both the war and the rhetoric are heating up. Putin has warned that he's put his nuclear forces on high alert as Russia is isolated financially by an extraordinary global response. But on the ground, Ukrainian cities are facing isolation too, increasingly encircled by Russian forces and under intensified assault. U.S. military sources say that Russia has brought most of its troops into Ukraine. Margaret Evans has the buildup in firepower and fear.
Ian, Ukraine has agreed to meet with a Russian delegation for talks on Monday along the Ukraine-Belarus border without any preconditions. But in the meantime, Russia is working very hard to strengthen its hand on the ground here. Moscow's reach making itself felt in the eastern border town of Kharkiv. Russian troops spotted on the ground in the city of 1.4 million people after days of softening it up with a barrage of artillery fire. Strong enough to send those who'd been determined to stay, heading for safety.
I took my camera, I took my computer, my dog, and that's all what I have.
We met Katerina Pereverseva in Kharkiv just 1 week ago. Now she's on the other side of the country, not planning to leave it, but feeling safer.
We feel a lot of shame that we leave our city. We feel a lot of shame that our lovely people stay there.
An attack on an oil depot just outside Kyiv. Fear finds its feet quickly in the face of brutal force. And the city is now under a 39-hour curfew, according to its mayor, surrounded. Shelling sending people underground as the city braces for an assault.
Definitely feels much safer than staying home alone, like in your apartment.
Taras Baran, his partner Kate Savina, and their dog Tufi have spent the past few nights in this hotel car park, shocked at the turn of events.
We were like, no one will do that in Kyiv.
Also taking up residence in the temporary bomb shelter, the International Committee of the Red Cross, describing the situation as dire.
People are underground, no food, no water, no electricity. If they want connectivity, they have to risk their lives to be in a place just to say, I'm safe, to their families.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is clearly skeptical about the outcome of Monday's talks with Russia. But let them try, he said in a video message, so that later not a single citizen of Ukraine has any doubt that I, as president, tried to stop the war. Many Ukrainians worry the Russians might try to impose conditions like neutrality.
It's going to be just a gray zone between the Russia and the rest of the world, so I guess it's not acceptable for anybody here.
For now, though, the focus is just on getting through the night. The Ukrainian leadership has said while it might be agreeing to talks, it is not agreeing to surrender.
Margaret Evans in Kyiv again tonight. The dogged determination of Ukrainian soldiers has hindered Russia's advance, but for how long? David Common is back with another big picture view of this fast-moving war. And David, tell us about the battle lines tonight.
Well, Ian, the Russians may not have counted on the resistance that they are facing. Let us start with the areas they do fully control, and that takes us to the south, Crimea, and the east, Luhansk and Donetsk. The Russian troops in this area are trying to pin the Ukrainian forces to restrict their ability to reinforce the capital. Next, let's turn to the north and northeast. These are the Russians who will make the run on Kyiv, but some of their vehicles are actually being destroyed en route or running out of gas because their supply lines can't keep up, sometimes being hit by Ukrainian soldiers with anti-tank weapons like these, or targeted from above by drones. There you see it, that released by Ukraine's Air Force. The Ukrainians also continue to take out bridges leading to Kyiv. That is an attempt to slow down the Russians. Now, every soldier in Ukraine is in the fight, but so too are lawyers and teachers and you name it, with new lethal equipment being sent urgently by road from multiple donor countries. Ukraine's president is also forming a new unit because Ukrainians who live abroad are returning to be part of the resistance. They are facing off against a nation with 4 times the soldiers, 4 times the Air Force. And yet, as of this morning, Ukraine had claimed that it had downed 27 Russian planes, 26 helicopters, 146 tanks, 706 armored vehicles, even 2 ships. The Kremlin has sent in more than 125,000 soldiers and can quickly push in another 65,000. Take a look at this. Satellite firm Maxar releasing these images, a 5-kilometer-long column of tanks, fighting vehicles, fuel trucks, self-propelled artillery. That was this morning. They were about 65 kilometers outside Kyiv then. A lot more that are behind them. Thousands of troops and far more devastating weapon systems that are still in Mother Russia. This is a thermobaric missile on top of a tank. Scary as it gets. They're called flamethrowers because they ignite the air and can suck the oxygen right out of your lungs. And with all of Putin's nuclear threats, let us remember that Russia has short-range, low-yield nukes. They've never been used in any war, but they could take out a neighborhood. The point is, we don't know how this ends. Putin does not see Ukraine as ever having been sovereign. He has staked his legacy on this invasion. The question is, at what cost?
All right, David, thank you. And the Russian president ramped up tensions today when he ordered Russian nuclear forces to be ready to launch. And as Katie Simpson tells us, the move has prompted a swift international response.
Russia is now threatening to go nuclear. The president ordering army deterrence forces into high combat alert. Simply put, it means soldiers have been ordered to be in an increased state of readiness to launch nuclear weapons. Vladimir Putin says the move is in response to what he calls illegal sanctions and his displeasure with comments from Western allies.
Top officials in leading NATO countries have allowed themselves to make aggressive comments about our country.
Colleagues,
the threat drew swift condemnation at the United Nations.
We urge Russia to tone down its dangerous rhetoric regarding nuclear weapons.
Members of the Security Council voted to hold an emergency session of the General Assembly to discuss the crisis on Monday, while other allies called Putin's words irresponsible.
It just highlights the importance of NATO allies standing together.
In the lead up to the invasion, Russia held a series of training exercises intended to show the world the capabilities of its nuclear forces. Putin's latest comments serve as a progression of that threat.
He is sending a signal to the United States, principally, that he is not backing down. And there is an ominous undertone here that, pushed to the wall, Russia could retaliate.
Pressure is mounting within the U.S. for the Biden administration to introduce more sanctions and send additional support to Ukraine, as lawmakers here grow louder in their condemnation of Putin's actions.
A small, evil, feral-eyed man who is trying to shape the world in the image where, once again, Russia would be an empire. And that's not going to happen.
So, Katie, take us through what the White House is saying and what's next in terms of the U.S. response.
The State Department is urging Americans in Russia to consider getting out while they can, citing the cancellation of flights and the impact of sanctions on credit cards. People can't just go about using their cards as per normal right now. President Biden spent the weekend with his family in Delaware, where he received regular updates from his national security team. More Western sanctions are being discussed, and expect additional measures in the days ahead. Ian.
Thanks, Katie. Caught in the middle of all of this are Ukrainian residents, many of whom have now fled the country or are desperately trying to. Susan Ormiston is in Poland near the border with Ukraine. And Susan, you've been talking to some refugees as they make their way across.
Yeah, what's staggering, Ian, is how long the lines at the border, a 25-kilometer gridlock of cars, how dense the crowds getting on trains, and how deep the fear. We've seen a lot of heartbreak and a lot of warmth.
Out of Ukraine into a safe embrace in Poland, a boy's sweet relief. The borderlands now a refuge from war. About 400,000 Ukrainians have fled in just 4 days. The exodus is accelerating. Family reunions, separations, and haunting memories. Katerina and Darina left after a bomb hit an airport near their home. We don't know when we'll go back. A lot of people were killed in the east and south. It's very scary. Crossing the border takes stamina and patience, a 60-hour wait on the Ukrainian side. On the Polish side, anxious calls and hours more of waiting, sometimes days. This woman praying for her relative to make it over safely. A couple trying to retrieve their daughter. Very worried. We haven't slept in 3 days. At the train station nearby, hundreds of newly arrived. Hot soup warms the body but can't soothe the soul. Lydia Boyko fled Chernobyl, taken by the Russians.
Terrified, we're scared, and we can't stay at home.
She came alone with her 3-year-old daughter.
Your husband can't leave?
No, he has to fight against Russia and to stop them from such a criminal.
Here and in cities across Poland, a heaping of help from strangers.
Voluntary services are mobilizing here at the train station. The trains from Lviv are absolutely jammed, escalating numbers of Ukrainians coming here to Poland. They're being offered water, food, toys, and transport to other places in Poland.
Derek Shanik is offering rides to Krakow.
I need to help, yes, because I don't want to sit on the couch and read the news.
The war has touched everyone.
I'm very angry.
Thousands of children are on the move. Families split, men of fighting age forbidden from leaving Ukraine, like Natalia's husband.
Hard for him to say goodbye to the kids.
Yeah, we cried all yesterday, the whole day. Yeah, and even now I'm thinking about him and worried. Yeah, that's very hard.
How are you feeling about your country?
It's a pity because, every time such feeling that we are not allowed to leave. We built the country for so many years, and because of somebody's desire, it will be just ruined. That's not normal, and it hurts a lot, really, because it's my country, right? It's my land.
With every night, worse than the last, more head for the borders if they can. Their sense of security shattered.
Susan, we've seen other refugee crises turn ugly as desperate people are rejected by the receiving countries, but it's different here.
It sure is. I mean, we're getting a sense and hearing it repeated that Ukraine is fighting for European values, and it's Europe's job to step up. And in small individual gestures, we're really seeing that. Putin's aggression is scaring people in neighboring countries. And so they're trying to help out. If anything, the war is pushing Ukraine closer to Europe and vice versa. And there are strong ties already. I mean, over 1 million Ukrainians already live in Poland. Many fled here after the last time Putin put boots on Ukrainian soil in Crimea.
Susan Ormiston in Poland tonight near the border with Ukraine. And Ukraine has launched a case at the International Court of Justice in The Hague, accusing Russia of planning genocide.
Маємо назвати речі своїми іменами. Злочинні дії Росії проти України мають ознаку геноциду. Про це я говорив із Генсеком ООН. Росія на шляху зла.
Russia has long accused Ukraine of genocide in the eastern Donbass region, a key justification for the invasion, which Ukraine denies. Some European countries are taking unprecedented action in the face of the Russian invasion. Chris Brown lays out the military support heading to Ukraine and the economic pain for Russia.
In European capitals such as Rome, people shouted, "Putin is a murderer," and demanded his soldiers get out of Ukraine. It was the same in Prague and Warsaw, and especially Berlin, where more than 100,000 people gathered at the city's Brandenburg Gate. I call on Russia's mothers to lock up their sons and husbands. Don't let them go to war, she said. But the real seismic moment for Germany came with a speech from its Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who set the nation's well-known tepidness for military spending aside and vowed to immediately double investments. The war is a catastrophe for Ukraine. It will also turn out to be a catastrophe for Russia, he said. Equally monumental was an announcement by the 27-member European Union that it would begin providing arms directly to Ukraine.
For the first time ever, the European Union will finance the purchase and delivery of weapons and other equipment to a country that is under attack. This is a watershed moment.
Witnessing the destruction and the heroic fight of Ukrainians has clearly frightened and moved EU countries to take actions that were mostly unthinkable a week ago, including freezing the overseas assets of Russia's central bank, banning Russian flights over EU countries, and moving to shut down Kremlin propaganda networks, also on Saturday morning, such as RT.
This could well be the beginning of the end for Putin.
Britain's Foreign Secretary also vowed more actions against Russia's richest people, who she says are helping bankroll the Kremlin's war.
We have compiled a hit list of oligarchs. We're working through and putting the cases together, and every few weeks we will sanction new oligarchs.
Some Western companies, of course, will pay a hefty price for the new moves. BP announced it's dumping its share of Russian oil producer Rosneft, potentially a $25 billion hit. Chris Brown, CBC News, London.
And some Russians continue to protest the invasion. Today, police detained more than 2,000 people at anti-war demonstrations in 48 Russian cities. That's according to a group that monitors crackdowns on the country's opposition. More than 5,000 people have been detained at various protests in Russia since Thursday. In Moscow, the foreign exchange market will open 3 hours later than normal on Monday morning. The ruble has already plunged 40% against the U.S. dollar. That's an all-time low. And the Russian central bank has appealed for calm in the wake of extensive sanctions. Along with other Western allies, the Canadian government is stepping up efforts to help Ukraine while also isolating Russia. Rafi Boudjikanian looks at the new action taken today and the other options that are still on the table.
Canada and its allies are working together to equip Ukraine with the tools they need to continue the fight.
At a hastily called news conference, new support for a country under siege.
Canada will send an additional $25 million worth of this protective equipment.
That's helmets, body armor, gas masks, all shipped through Poland, the same route other countries such as Greece have used to bypass potential Russian interference. In a move to further punish Russia, Canada joined several other Western countries banning Russian aircraft from its airspace. Meanwhile, in Canada's capital, demonstrations against Russia continue. Hundreds gathered in front of the country's embassy today.
My parents escaped in the Second World War. Our Ukrainian people are fighting, but they don't have as many soldiers as the Russians do, right? They don't have the military equipment the way the Russians do.
Sending more weapons is something Canada says it is considering. For now, Canada won't be sending in troops. While Canadians are advised not to travel to Ukraine, the government is sympathetic to Ukrainian Canadians looking to book a flight east.
We understand this is a fight for Ukraine's motherland, and we understand the desire to go.
The next step in Canada's efforts may well be on another front entirely. It may follow the European Union with efforts to remove the Kremlin-backed Russia Today channel from Canadian TV. A government source tells CBC News it's encouraging broadcasters to voluntarily stop offering RT, something at least one carrier, Bell Canada, has already done. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Ottawa.
After closing Canada's airspace to Russian commercial planes, there's already been at least one violation. And Transport Canada says it's launching a review of the conduct of Aeroflot and the air traffic control company NAV Canada after Aeroflot Flight 111, going from Miami to Moscow, entered Canada's airspace near Labrador. To symbolize Canada's official support of Ukraine, the Peace Tower on Parliament Hill is lit up tonight in that country's colors, yellow and blue. But Canada's unofficial response has also been hard to miss. In several cities this weekend, people took to the streets to denounce Russia's invasion and to show support for an ally with deep ties to communities here. Russian Canadians among those standing up for Ukraine. Lorenda Redekop gives us a cross-country sampling.
In Toronto, they called this the Mega March, and it was far bigger than previous rallies. It ended in front of City Hall. Many are worried about their loved ones.
Get off Ukraine. Putin, get off Ukraine, please. And don't kill our kids, our people, please.
With Ukraine, Canada, with Ukraine. One university student says a bomb hit an apartment building in Kyiv, a block from his parents' place.
They were not able to leave the city, and now they can because it's too dangerous.
This couple has sponsored children in Ukraine for years.
She's terrified. If you had seen the look on her face when we had our video call, she's choking back tears and she's absolutely terrified.
Many of the signs here send a direct message to Russian President Vladimir Putin. This Russian couple says they felt they had to attend.
I'm crying, I think, every day because I hate my government. This is crime, world crime, global crime, and I feel guilty.
I don't know how I'm feeling myself. I'm literally lost. Ever since the first day I learned that this happened.
He worries about his parents and the effect the sanctions could have on them. Thousands of people demonstrated in Montreal, among them the leader of the Bloc Québécois. In Saskatoon, they unrolled a giant Ukrainian flag. In Edmonton, a couple thousand people formed a human chain that stretched for blocks. At an earlier event in Edmonton, in front of the legislature, this Russian-Canadian woman burned her Russian passport. Her grandmother is Ukrainian.
I was not able to go and speak out on the streets in Moscow when I was leaving, because I was scared to death.
United by their outrage and grief, they made it clear they stand with Ukraine. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
The conflict in Ukraine isn't just being fought with weapons. Russia is also using sophisticated online propaganda.
We're seeing things like
dubious claims regarding fatalities or attribution to particular strikes.
Up next, how some social platforms are looking to crack down. Plus, the news out of Ukraine is difficult for anyone to take in, but for kids, it can be very scary.
The questions I was receiving today are, are we in danger? Are we going to be bombed?
Coming up, how experts say teachers and parents can answer those tough questions. And a little later.
This is not even in the realm of what I thought could happen, so it's really amazing. It's just incredible.
How this Winnipeg woman is going above and beyond to help the people of Ukraine. Today, the governing body for World Cup soccer stopped short of banning Russia from qualifying games, despite a movement to do so led by Poland. FIFA did say Russia must play without its national flag or anthem and on neutral territory with no fans. Poland and Russia had been set to meet in Moscow late next month. But on Saturday, the Polish Soccer Federation said it refuses to play Russia now that it has invaded Ukraine. Semi-finalists Sweden and Czech Republic followed suit. And Ukrainian athletes have led a call to suspend Russia and Belarus from the Beijing Paralympics, which are set to begin on Friday. They sent an open letter to the heads of the International Olympic and Paralympic committees with support from athletes in 24 countries. That includes Canadian Olympians Clara Hughes and Becky Scott. It is morning in Kyiv and echoes of battles can be heard, but the city remains in the hands of Ukrainian forces. War often means chaotic, fast-moving conditions where reliable information is hard to find. Even the widespread use of cell phone cameras and social media hasn't cut through the fog of war in Ukraine. As Susanna De Silva shows us, in some ways it's made things even worse.
Volodymyr Vasilevsky has barely put his phone down since the war began, trying to keep up with the latest.
It just nothing exists to me right now, except, my people and my close ones back at home.
He just spoke to his parents. They're taking cover from recent shelling near their home west of Kyiv, and he's careful about where else he gets his information.
It is a lot of false and fake information. I'm following only Ukrainian news because they have 24/7 marathon, and this is the most updated information.
While battles rage on the ground, another battle is being fought online. The weapons, misinformation, and propaganda.
We've seen a lot of people just taking old footage that is unrelated to Ukraine and portraying that as the latest update.
On Friday, Ukrainian officials claimed all soldiers on a small island were killed while defiantly refusing Russian demands. But Russian state TV is now claiming to have footage of them alive in custody. Some groups are now trying to verify what's coming out.
The scale of this feels very different. The amount of footage that's coming out of this conflict is larger.
Steps have been taken to weed out some false claims, with Facebook and Google stopping Russian state-owned media outlets from running ads. On the other side, Russia is controlling information coming in by restricting Facebook and Twitter. For those watching from afar, experts say do some research before sharing.
You don't have to be the first person to tweet out the new video. You can wait the 30 minutes because in 30 minutes you'll have a better sense of whether this is true or false.
It's all the information how you can help.
Vasilevsky's focus now is on what he can do to help.
I'm just giving this information to the people. If they can help, any donation will be helpful.
The kind of information he wants to see spread. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
So images of war have been moving fast on social media, and if you have children in your life, they may have questions about what's happening and why. Deanna Sumanag-Johnson went searching for advice on how best to tackle this difficult topic.
Sadaf Salim didn't want her kids, 9-year-old Ilyas and 11-year-old Aya, to hear about the war in Ukraine in the schoolyard, so she offered a preemptive chat.
I wanted them to feel safe. I wanted them to say, right now, there's no military act that Canada's doing, but I really want them to empathize because we have a very diverse school.
The plan that we're seeing is for something that could be really the biggest war in Europe since 1945.
With frightening images and words heard on the news or on social media.
This is threatening a World War III.
Teachers say they're already hearing that anxiety in their classrooms, hot on the heels of fears about COVID.
The questions I was receiving today are, are we in danger? Are we going to be bombed? What is NATO? Who are our allies? Right? So real solid questions.
I think younger students have had a relationship with this concept of global, panic, global dynamics, global pandemics, global death that maybe a lot of us didn't have to have.
What was your scariest moment in the war?
Experts who speak to children about war all the time, like veterans, say there are strategies parents and teachers can adopt, including giving context to the conflict in simple, clear terms, explaining what criteria Canada might consider in getting further involved, and refraining from demonizing whole nations.
I think this is for me, a very clear-cut incidence of a great evil and wrong being done by the invasion. But I mean, when you're talking about individual Russians, they will have many different opinions about this.
Carry the one. For Sadaf Salim's kids, the knowledge that they're safe in Canada is, for now, enough, as parents field a new batch of tough questions without easy answers. Deanna Sumanek-Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
The attack on Ukraine is splitting families apart, forcing some citizens to make decisions that will put their lives at risk. Coming up, I'll speak to a man who's returned to take up the fight after helping his family escape to safety. Let's take another look at Kyiv, where it is now Monday morning. A quiet scene at this moment, but the city is a battleground. More explosions have been heard as Russian forces fight to take Ukraine's capital city. Well, more and more Ukrainian citizens are preparing to fight back, forced to separate from their families and move towards danger. Peter Zalmayev is one of them. He is currently near Kyiv. And Peter, we spoke with you on this show last week in your capacity as an expert. Since then, you've moved your family to a safer part of the country. What was that journey like?
Well, obviously, it was a very exhausting journey. You've probably all heard about the extremely jam-packed traffic snaking throughout Ukraine, leading from Kiev to western parts of the country and across the border to Poland. We decided not to leave the country. They're not in Poland. We were able to evacuate them to a safer place within Ukraine, in western parts of Ukraine. But it's a very exhausting journey, but at the same time, inspiring. What I've seen on the streets of Kiev, Ukrainian towns, villages, and cities is unlike anything the country has known since 1940s, since World War II. A massive mobilization drive. You see groups of men, women putting up roadblocks, cleaning up old weapons, and basically getting ready to meet the enemy.
And now you've headed back to near Kyiv, and you're taking up arms. Tell me about, your motivation and what you're hoping to do.
Well, this is precisely the motivation. When you see a lot of your own comrades, folks that work with you on TV, and journalists, when you see rock stars who take up arms, have taken up arms in defense of the capital, I mean, you have no other choice. You have to go back. You have to be with them. This is kind of a moment to, for you to stand up and be counted. And this is, it's for you to make sure that Ukraine remains independent. Ukraine remains a viable state. When something like this is happening to you, it's surreal. It's like you've only read about it in books, and all of a sudden you're reading these books about war. Personal gets commingled with, with global. I mean, we've sort of been thrust into global history now.
Do you have a gun? Have you served in the army? What is, in a very kind of direct way, what is your plan?
That's a good question. I have not had much formal training at all. I mean, I've shot in, practice, sporadically here and there, but we're we're just practicing as we go. You know, we make stops and we practice out in the fields. We do have arms. It is very tricky to be traveling now near Kiev and towards the capital, simply because there are bands of diversionary troops and Russian agents on roads. You have to be driving very carefully, watching out for any suspicious signs. There have already been quite a few incidents, you know, involving people being attacked, assaulted on the roads. So you just have to be very, very careful.
It is clear you're driven by a sense of duty, a sense of national pride, a sense of doing what is necessary. But is there must be anxiety as well. Are you worried tonight?
You know, it's a wild kind of ride. You know, you wake up feeling uplifted, then you start reading news, and then your mood goes down. It's just up and down, up and down. It's very unstable. But from everything we read from NBC, this is getting much more difficult adventure for Vladimir Putin than he expected when he set out. Ukrainians have put up such stiff resistance that you already hear talk of nuclear weapons being readied by the Russians. That sounds to me like Vladimir Putin is getting desperate, that his blitzkrieg, his shock and awe campaign has failed miserably. He is really getting much, much, much more than he bargained for.
It is an extraordinary story, and thank you very much for taking time tonight to speak with us about it.
Thank you.
We are keeping a close eye on the situation as it unfolds in Ukraine, but we're also tracking some other stories tonight. Terminally ill patients are being denied a treatment that could bring them peace of mind as they face death.
It allows people to have a more comfortable process, to feel more positive.
A CBC Go Public investigation looks at the push for easier access to an illegal psychedelic substance. Plus,
found some cinnamon bagels here.
How Canadians are finding creative solutions in the face of rising grocery bills. This week is expected to bring some major changes to Alberta. The province is set to scrap nearly all remaining COVID restrictions.
Fortunately, all signs here and across the world suggest that the worst of COVID-19 is behind us.
The Premier, Jason Kenney, announcing this weekend that he believes it's safe to move to step 2 of reopening. Starting Tuesday, the provincial mask mandate will be lifted, except for high-risk settings like hospitals and public transit. Social gathering limits and capacity limits for venues will also be dropped. Saskatchewan also moving to ease restrictions. Starting tomorrow, face masks will not be mandatory in indoor public spaces. People will also no longer be required to isolate for 5 days if they test positive for COVID, though the 5-day isolation period is still recommended. 2 major new studies have been released backing the theory that COVID originated at a market, not a lab, in Wuhan, China. The studies haven't yet been peer-reviewed, but researchers say their analysis makes it clear the virus came from the market and it likely spread from animals sold in late 2019. Parts of British Columbia are under warnings tonight due to heavy rain. After an unusually dry February, Environment Canada says Metro Vancouver could see up to 70 millimeters of rain by tomorrow night. And southeast of Kelowna, in BC's interior, up to 50 centimeters of snow could fall. Imagine you've been given a terminal diagnosis and there's a drug that can help alleviate your fear of dying, but the government won't let you have it. That's what's happening to lots of cancer patients, all because of a Health Canada rule change. Caroline Bargout from our Go Public team has the story.
Janice Hughes has had a long journey. 10 years ago, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. In January, the 65-year-old Winnipegger was given 2 years to live.
It makes one desperate. So much to be done.
Hughes is afraid of dying, but doesn't want to be. Studies have shown psilocybin, the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, helps to ease the anxiety in end-of-life patients.
It allows people to have a more comfortable process, to feel more positive.
Psilocybin is illegal in Canada. But since 2020, Health Canada has granted 79 patient exemptions for medical purposes. Hughes requested one, but the government said no.
I don't understand why.
Health Canada had changed the rules. As of January 5th, patients won't get an exemption unless they can show they've exhausted all other legal options, like getting their doctor to apply on their behalf. But Hughes' doctor won't do it.
The new rules require a physician to fill out a complicated application form that asks for the results of psilocybin studies and other clinical data. The doctor must also take full responsibility. They must administer the drug and report to the government how the patient responded to it.
It's a high bar, and this palliative doctor believes this new system is a roadblock to access.
We have an effective and durable treatment. We are withholding that from patients and allowing them to suffer, which I think is unethical.
Health Canada won't comment on specific exemption requests. A spokesperson told Go Public further research is still needed.
I have beautiful nieces and nephews that I want to spend time with. I'm going to start sobbing. I'm not ready to go.
Hughes is hoping the government reverses its decision so that she and others facing the end of their lives will find a little peace before they go. Caroline Bargood, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The rising cost of food has been on everyone's minds lately, leaving many Canadians looking for creative solutions to cut down their grocery bill. Now a growing number of people are turning to technology to help in more ways than one. Alison Northcott explains as part of our series, Priced Out.
So I'm going to open the Flash Food app here.
This is one way Luke Nichols saves money on groceries.
I found some cinnamon bagels here.
Using a food waste app that connects him to discount products at grocery stores and allows him to pay less for food that might otherwise be thrown out.
As food prices rise and people start feeling the constraints like I am, that they look to the alternatives.
About 20% of food produced in Canada each year ends up going to waste, and there are several companies now trying to tap into that.
The growth we've seen in Canada has been really the fastest we've seen across any of the other countries we've launched.
For another app called Too Good To Go, the company says part of that growth is about timing because it entered the Canadian market just as food prices were rising.
As we're all faced and pinched with the challenges of food inflation, our platform is a great avenue to be able to get great value.
I can increase the number of coupons.
Restaurants like this Montreal bubble tea shop use the app to sell what's left over at the end of the day at cheaper prices.
We are practically becoming zero food waste facility.
And that's just one way consumers are cutting costs. Others are shopping at stores like this one in Calgary, specializing in selling produce near the end of its shelf life and drawing in customers with low prices.
Being a low-income senior, I'm trying to stretch the dollar as much as I can and eat as healthy as I can.
When things aren't perfect, they have some blemishes or they have a few days left on them, we list them for a cheaper price. They're still perfectly good to eat.
Food rescue apps and discount produce stores are good tools, but bigger changes are needed, says this food systems expert.
There's just a lot of opportunities around shortening the food supply chain, growing in the city, growing in peri-urban areas that we really should take advantage of.
She says that would be one step towards a less wasteful and more equitable food system. Alison Northcott, CBC News, Montreal.
Up next, a Ukrainian-Canadian woman finds a way to support her homeland with the help from her local community.
We have people donating $100, $150.
How a call on social media led to an outpouring of support. Let's take another look at Kyiv. Throughout Ukraine, people are waiting to see what another day of fighting might bring, hoping it's another day of survival and defiance. Well, this is Koya Zostetsky. She makes and sells earrings in Winnipeg and wanted to help out her native country of Ukraine. So she came up with an idea and put the call out on social media. The response has been overwhelming. She decided to hold a raffle with prizes donated from small businesses in her community, and the response has grown larger than she ever imagined. Tonight, this collective act of charity is our moment.
I was born in Ukraine. and my family immigrated here in 2005. We still have family in Ukraine, we have friends in Ukraine. I just felt very hopeless and didn't know what to do sitting here in Canada. So I put out a call to see if anyone wanted to donate things for a fundraiser, for a raffle, and the feedback was just through the roof. I had over 200 makers, local businesses, people offering to help donate their credits to their businesses, prizes. I still have people reaching out for donations. They're still coming in. We have people donating $100, $150, some people buying just $40, $60, $10, like anything helps. This is not even in the realm of what I thought could happen, so it's really amazing. I just think of the people and I hope that this can somehow at least do at least a little bit and help in some way.
You know, in Ukraine and so often around the world when there's a crisis, people obviously want to do something. Sometimes you see them collect things and ship them, and you hear from charities on the other end what they need is money, and they can deploy the money in the best way possible. That sale so far and the fundraiser has raised $40,000. And I feel like similar things are probably going on in different parts of the country. That is The National for February 27th. Good night.